Hey, this is Elijah with the Oxygen team, and today I'm going to show you how to build a link in bio page using WordPress and Oxygen. If you build websites as a freelancer or agency, you've probably run into clients that really need something like this. This is a Linktree page, also known as a link in bio page. Here's another example. Basically, it's just a page with a bunch of links. And there are a lot of people and businesses that don't need much more than this. But you don't always want to be beholden to a platform like Linktree because they can change things, they can lock you into certain things, and there's no room to grow. So you might want to create something like this as a starting point that can then be expanded later. And that's where using WordPress and Oxygen is a really good idea. So I'm going to pin these tabs because we're going to reference these as we start building our link in bio page out using Oxygen. And let's jump over to our Oxygen site. This is a screen you'll see immediately after installing Oxygen, and in my case, I'm going to use a blank install. So to get our link in bio page set up, the first thing we need to do is create a page. The nice thing about this is you're not going to need anything except for your home page. Let's go ahead and click Add New. I deleted the sample page there just to get it out of the way, and we'll just call it Link in Bio. Now let's publish that. Now, before we jump into Oxygen, we do need to set this as our home page because we want people to land there when they come to our website. We'll go to Settings, Reading, and here we'll select the Static Page option, and under Home Page, we'll choose Link in Bio. We'll save those changes, and then we can jump back over to our page and start building it out. Again, this option is really fantastic for clients that don't need a lot right now, but that want the option to expand their website without having to switch platforms later. I think that's a great selling point for WordPress in general, especially for clients who really don't need much at the moment. But WordPress is really a platform that can do whatever you need it to do, so you can start out small and grow over time with your business. So here we are on our link in bio page. Let's take a look at these. This Queensland one is a little bit of a mess with the contrast of the text on the background image. I kind of like the design of this one better, so I think that's what we're going to go with. Though I do like this floating header, so if we end up with a longer page, I might implement that. But for now, let's go ahead and set this up. We've got a few elements here, so I'm going to actually take a picture of this, and I'm going to move that off screen to save it to my computer, and then I'm going to jump over to Oxygen, and I'm actually going to drop that in as an image. This is a trick I like to use to be able to quickly reference whatever I'm trying to reproduce. So let's select that image, drop it in, and now we can see what we're trying to build. So let's add our section here, and we'll move it up in our structure pane. The first really cool feature of this is a kind of CSS gradient blurred background. So here's what I think I'm going to do. I'm going to add some divs. So we'll add a div, and we'll add a class called blurry blob. And we're going to give this a size of maybe 300 by 300. Then we're going to give it a background color of, I don't know, something like, kind of like the example, maybe purple here. And then we're going to adjust the border radius a bit. So we'll go down here and we'll edit the individual radius corners so that we can actually get kind of a blobby shape. So we'll do like 100 here, maybe 25 here, and maybe 500 here, and then maybe 50 here. So now we get this kind of irregular shape. Now we'll go to Advanced Effects, and we're going to rotate this a bit, I think. So we'll go to Transform, Add Transform, and rotate something like that probably. And then we'll go back to Effects, and we're going to add a filter, and we're going to do Blur. And we're just going to really blur that out. So you can see we get kind of a similar effect to what we have here. Now it doesn't have the kind of overlay, but we'll add that here in a minute. So let's go ahead and select our section. We're going to go to Advanced Layout and make sure it's set to Position Relative because we want to absolutely position these other elements inside of it. So here's our blurry blob. We're going to go to Advanced Layout and go to Position Absolute, which gives us the ability to go ahead and position that relative to the container. So we'll do like 32 pixels top, 32 pixels right, which moves it kind of over there. And maybe we'll do like 128 from the right to get it off that edge. Now on this section, we do need to go to Advanced Layout and make sure we're set to Overflow Hidden so we don't get that weird overflow. So now we have one of our blurry blobs. Let's rename this. I'm double clicking that. I'm going to call it blurry blob. And let's just duplicate that once, and we'll add a modifier class to this, blurry blob dash dash 2. And on this one, we can adjust the color a bit. We'll go to maybe a blue or a teal. And then we can adjust the position here. We'll go to advanced layout, absolute, and we can actually move it a bit further from the right, maybe 256 pixels, something like that, and then maybe 128 from the top. So now we're going to get this overlap effect. Let's go ahead and increase the height of this section a bit. So let's go to advanced, size and spacing, and set height to, actually we'll do min height 100 VH. So you can see we're kind of getting this nice effect. So now we just need to duplicate these a few times. And I think what I'll do is I'll do a couple at the top right corner and then a couple at the bottom left. So let's duplicate this one, and we will just go ahead and add another modifier class, blurry blob dash dash 3, and we'll go to advanced layout, position absolute, and we'll do like maybe 90% to move it over. Actually, a little bit less than that. Let's do 70%. And then top, we'll do something like 70% as well. So now we get that kind of effect. We could rotate this a bit too to vary it up, but I don't necessarily think we need to in this case. Now let's duplicate our teal one, and we're going to add a modifier class to this as well, blurry blob dash dash 4, advanced layout, position absolute, and then again we're going to use those percentages here. So we'll do something like 40% here, and then 50% there. So now we get this kind of diagonal effect with these. Now this one, I do want to adjust the color a bit. So we'll go back to primary, change the background color. Let's move it more towards a green. And then on this last purple one that we did, which is here, we'll change the background color more towards maybe a pink or purple. There we go. So now we have this cool kind of gradient background effect. We do want to make it fade a bit in the background. We have a couple of options for that. We could just set the transparency on our core blurry blob class. So we could go to advanced, effects, opacity, and reduce the opacity. And that's probably the simplest way. If you're going to have a background image, you would probably want to do an overlay div. In this case, I think we can just get away with doing opacity on the blobs themselves. So that's perfect. There's our background, which is one of the more kind of fancy aspects of this design. Now we need a few elements. We need an image, a heading, some text below that heading, and then some link wrappers that'll have an icon and text inside of them. So let's go ahead and whip those up with Emmet really quickly. So I'm hitting Command Shift E. You can also use Control Shift E. Now what we're going to need is a div to put everything inside of, because I want to raise the Z index of all the elements in this section. So we'll type div. Then inside that div, we're going to have an image plus an H1 plus a paragraph plus a link wrapper. And inside that link wrapper, we're going to have an icon plus text. Now, when we hit enter, that's going to drop in that structure for us. Then we can start designing it. But the first thing to do is select this div that contains all of our inner elements. And we're going to go to advanced layout and raise that Z index a bit. We'll just do 1 for now, which should be sufficient. Now we need an image, so let's browse. I'll just use this one since it's the only one I have uploaded. We'll set the aspect ratio to 1/1 to make sure it's square. Object fit is going to be cover. And then we're going to change the width and height to something like 128. And in fact, because we set the aspect ratio, we don't actually have to set the height. Let's bump that up to 256. And that might be a bit big, so let's just do 200. Then we're going to go to advanced borders and change the radius to 100%. Then let's add a bit of a box shadow on this. So we'll do a class called shadow, and we'll go to advanced effects, box shadow, and just add a slightly transparent, not quite all the way black shadow with a little bit of vertical offset. And we'll probably reuse this shadow on other elements. We'll increase the blur quite a bit and then reduce the spread by, say, 14 pixels. That gives us a nice, fairly subtle shadow effect. One thing I also like to do sometimes is add a border. So we'll go to advanced borders, and we'll add a white border that's 4 pixels and solid. And that gives us a slightly nicer look there. Next, we want to drop in our company name. So we'll call it Oxygen is awesome. And we can, of course, style this a bit. I'll probably leave the font size at default, but I am going to make it all the way black. Now, before we get much further with this, I do want to go ahead and center this within the section. And then all of the elements in the div itself should be centered as well. So let's make sure we have that selected and choose center. We also might want to restrict the maximum width of this. So let's do advanced size and spacing. Let's set the width to 100%, but the max width is something like 700. Now let's add our kind of tagline, the most powerful visual site builder for WordPress. Wonderful. And on this div here, we'll probably want a gap, and then we can reduce the gap a bit on the elements that we don't need it on by using margin. So we'll go to advanced typography on this heading, and let's change the line height to 1.2. And then we'll go to advanced size and spacing and set the margin bottom to maybe negative 24 pixels. Actually, let's go to full 32 to bring it right up there under the heading so that that tagline and heading are pretty close. Now, let's take a look at these buttons. It looks like they're pretty wide with centered text and icon off to the left. I don't love that design, so we might tweak that a bit. But let's select our button or our link wrapper, and let's add a button class. And once that class is on there, we can go ahead and duplicate it a couple of times and start styling it. But let's add a class to our icon as well. We'll do button underscore underscore icon, and then for the text we'll do button underscore underscore label. Now let's go back to the button, duplicate it a couple of times using Command or Control D, and then let's go ahead and start styling it. So the background color is going to be white. Under advanced borders, we are going to add a slight border radius, maybe 12 pixels, actually maybe 8. We want it a little more subtle. Then let's go back to advanced size and spacing and add some padding here. So we probably want a little less on the top and bottom than on the left and right. So we'll do 12, 12, 32, 32. Now, if we want them to be full width, we can make them that way. We can do 100% here. I don't know if I love it, but just to stay somewhat true to the original design, we'll do it. Then we'll go back to primary and make sure everything stacks horizontally and is centered vertically. Now, I think instead of having that icon on the left and the text centered, I'm just going to space between these. So I'll do space between, actually maybe space around. That looks a little bit better. And then I do want to add our shadow class to this, I think. Yeah, that looks pretty good. We'll add it to each of these. And for classes like shadow, where it only has one job and you shouldn't be adjusting styles on it, we'll go to advanced and lock the selector styles to avoid accidentally making changes on it when we don't want to. So let's go back to our button class. Are there any other adjustments we need to make? Yes, we need to change the typography color. So let's go to advanced typography and we'll change the color to black. Now we can adjust these icons. So we'll just do social media icons. So something like Facebook. We'll do something like Twitter and then maybe LinkedIn. Let's do LinkedIn. And then we'll say follow us on Facebook. And you see we're going to have a spacing issue there if our text is not always the same. So we're going to want to adjust these styles, but that's okay. Follow us on Twitter and follow us on LinkedIn. Okay, so what do we do about this spacing? It looks really bad like that, right? So we have a few options. We could completely reproduce this by making our icon absolutely positioned just off to the left and then centering the text. But instead of that, I think a better approach would be to just align everything to the center with some space between it. So we could do that and then add a gap of like 32 pixels. That doesn't look bad, but then you have that kind of jagged left line, which doesn't look great. So I think I would prefer to just align everything to the left. Even though these buttons are really wide, I think that looks okay. The other thing we could do is reduce the max width of these buttons. So we could go to advanced size and spacing and set the max width to something like 80%, which would make it a little bit more reasonable. Now you would want to adjust that as you go down in screen size to phones. You would definitely want to set those to be 100% width and probably stack vertically. So we could do that here, 100%. And then we could go back to primary, set it to vertical, and that looks pretty good. So it just takes a minor adjustment to get that going. We would also need to adjust this font size down a bit, and everything else looks pretty good. That's the nice thing about these simple kind of link and bio pages is that they're very easy to make mobile friendly. So let's take a look at our design again that we're replicating. It looks like they have a little bit of a divider with some text here. So we can add that as well. We'll just add another link and we'll say contact us. Change the icon to maybe an envelope, and then we'll duplicate this text, move it on down, set the font weight to 600, and say check out our social media profiles. So now we can get rid of this inspiration image and save this and go ahead and jump up to the front end and take a look at what we've created. So when we go to our root domain, we're going to see this nice link in bio landing page with some links, some buttons, things we can click, and ways to contact our company. So again, this is Elijah with the Oxygen team, and that's how to create a link in bio page using WordPress and Oxygen. Thank you very much for watching.